I'm Jessica, 28 years old, and I never thought I'd be sitting in a courtroom with my own family trying to legally force me to give up my kidney. The judge's gavel hangs suspended in the air, ready to decide whether parents can actually sue their child for refusing to donate an organ. Across from me sit my mother, father, and my sister Caroline, their golden child, looking at me like I'm a monster. But what they don't know is that I've spent my entire life being nothing more than spare parts for their perfect daughter. And today, everything changes forever. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe because this journey of family betrayal and finding my own strength is just beginning. And trust me, you won't believe where this goes next. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, the hierarchy was crystal clear from day one. Caroline was 3 years younger than me, but she might as well have been royalty. Every family photo showed the same pattern. Caroline front and center in her pristine dress, while I stood slightly behind, always prepared to fade into the background. My parents, Robert and Linda, had created a world where Caroline's needs, wants, and dreams took priority over everything else, including basic fairness or my own well-being. The signs started early, though I didn't recognize them as red flags until much later. When Caroline was 7 and I was 10, she broke her arm falling off her bike. Instead of rushing her to the emergency room, my parents first made sure to grab my medical records folder. At the time, I thought they were being thorough parents. Looking back, I realized they were already calculating what parts of me might be needed to fix what was broken in Caroline. They kept detailed files of my blood type, my medical history, even my dental records, all labeled emergency information for Caroline. Every achievement I earned was immediately overshadowed by whatever Caroline was doing. When I made honor roll, the celebration dinner became about Caroline's upcoming science fair project. When I got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, the family meeting focused on how we could afford Caroline's private high school tuition. The message was clear. My successes were just stepping stones to support Caroline's more important future. I learned to celebrate my victories privately because sharing them with family meant watching them get minimized or ignored entirely. Caroline seemed to intuitively understand her position in the family ecosystem. She developed an uncanny ability to have medical emergencies or emotional crises whenever I was receiving any positive attention. If relatives were praising my artwork, Caroline would suddenly feel dizzy. If I was talking about my job promotion, Caroline would remember a concerning symptom that needed immediate discussion. My parents fell for it every single time, dropping everything to fuss over their precious daughter, while I learned to make myself invisible. The most telling incident happened when Caroline was 12, and came down with what appeared to be a serious kidney infection. The doctor mentioned that if it developed into something more serious, family members would need to be tested for compatibility. Without even asking my opinion, my parents immediately scheduled me for comprehensive testing. I was 15 years old, sitting in a medical office answering questions about my future childbearing plans because my parents needed to know if donating a kidney to Caroline would affect my ability to give them grandchildren. The infection cleared up with antibiotics, but those test results went straight into their emergency folder. Throughout high school and college, I paid for my own therapy sessions because I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with our family dynamic. The therapist helped me understand that I was being raised as an emotional and physical insurance policy for my sister. When I tried to discuss these insights with my parents, they dismissed my concerns as jealousy and suggested I should be grateful to have such a special role in Caroline's life. They actually used the phrase chosen protector, as if being designated spare parts was some kind of honor. Caroline breezed through medical school, while I worked multiple jobs to support myself through my marketing degree. She got the family financial support, the emotional encouragement, and the safety net of knowing that no matter what happened, the family would rally around her. I got the character-building experience of complete self-reliance, and the knowledge that my value was directly tied to my usefulness to Caroline's success. When she graduated medical school, the family celebration felt more like a coronation, with me playing the role of grateful subject rather than proud sister. 6 months ago, everything changed when Caroline was diagnosed with kidney disease. The family emergency meeting was called within 24 hours, and for the first time in years, I was not just invited but required to attend. As I walked into my childhood home, seeing my medical folder already spread across the dining room table, I knew that the moment I had been unconsciously preparing for my entire life had finally arrived. The Sunday dinner ambush was orchestrated with military precision. I arrived expecting our usual awkward family meal, but instead found Caroline's nephrologist, Dr. Martinez, seated at our dining room table with a stack of medical files and a presentation folder. My parents had transformed our family dinner into a medical consultation without my knowledge or consent, and the agenda was clearly predetermined. The moment I sat down, I realized this wasn't a discussion about Caroline's treatment options. This was a sales pitch for my kidney. Dr. Martinez began with a clinical explanation of Caroline's condition, speaking directly to me as if I were already an enrolled donor rather than someone learning about this situation for the first time. Caroline sat beside him, pale and trembling, playing the role of tragic victim with Oscar-worthy performance. She dabbed at her eyes with tissues and spoke in a weak voice about how scared she was, how she never expected this to happen, how her dreams of helping patients were now in jeopardy. My parents nodded sympathetically, their hands clasped together in a show of unified parental concern. The request came disguised as a medical recommendation. Dr. Martinez explained that family donors had the highest success rates and that my preliminary blood work from years ago showed excellent compatibility. He discussed the surgery timeline, recovery expectations, and follow-up care as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. When I asked about risks to my own health, my father interrupted to remind everyone that family sacrifices for family, and that God must have made me a perfect match for a reason. The religious manipulation was new territory, considering our family had rarely attended church, except for major holidays. Caroline's performance reached new heights when I asked for time to think about the decision. Tears flowed as she talked about watching her classmates continue their medical careers while she faced an uncertain future. She mentioned her boyfriend David, a fellow medical resident, and how he was standing by her despite everything, as if her medical condition might somehow make her less worthy of love. My mother reached across the table to squeeze Caroline's hand while shooting me a look that clearly communicated my selfishness in not immediately volunteering my organs. The emotional manipulation escalated when my parents began involving extended family members in their campaign. My Aunt Patricia, who had always been my favorite relative, called that evening to express her disappointment in my hesitation. She reminded me of all the times Caroline had shared her toys with me as children, as if childhood sibling dynamics were equivalent to adult organ donation decisions. My grandmother followed up with a guilt-inducing voicemail about family loyalty and how she had sacrificed for her siblings during the Depression, comparing my situation to her giving up food during wartime. Financial pressure joined the emotional assault within days. My parents reminded me that they were co-signers on my student loans and suggested that family members who didn't support each other couldn't expect continued financial assistance. They mentioned that Caroline's medical bills were going to strain the family budget significantly, and that my contribution to the solution would help everyone move forward together. The implication was clear: donate the kidney or lose their support in every aspect of my life. The smear campaign began subtly but quickly gained momentum. Family friends started approaching me at the grocery store and local coffee shop to express their support for Caroline, and their hope that she would receive the help she needed. Church members who barely knew me offered to pray for my decision-making process, and suggested that God's will would become clear if I opened my heart to what was right. My parents were clearly presenting my hesitation as a temporary obstacle rather than a legitimate personal choice. The first major betrayal came from my Aunt Patricia, who had been my confidant throughout childhood. Instead of supporting my need for time and information, she sided completely with my parents' perspective. During what I thought was a private conversation, she called me ungrateful and selfish, reminding me that my parents had fed, clothed, and educated me for 28 years. According to her reasoning, the least I could do was help save my sister's life when I had the power to do so. Her words stung because I had always viewed her as someone who understood me independently of my family role. My social circle began shrinking as friends reported receiving calls from my family members about my heartless response to Caroline's medical crisis. College roommates were contacted and told that I was going through a difficult time and might need encouragement to make the right choice. Co-workers mentioned casual conversations with my mother in the grocery store, during which she had shared Caroline's situation and expressed hope that family love would prevail over selfishness. The isolation was systematic and effective, leaving me questioning whether my hesitation was actually evidence of some moral failing. The manipulation reached its peak when my parents organized a family gathering specifically to discuss Caroline's situation and my role in her recovery. Extended family members from 3 states attended, creating an audience for what amounted to an intervention designed to pressure me into compliance. They had prepared photo albums showing Caroline and me throughout childhood, emphasizing moments when we had played together or when Caroline had shown kindness. The message was clear. This loving sister deserved my sacrifice, and refusing to help her was a betrayal of everything our family represented. My decision to consult with my own nephrologist came from a growing sense that something was missing from the family's medical narrative. Dr. Jennifer Park, who had been my primary care physician's referral for a kidney screening, approached my case with professional objectivity that was notably absent from our family discussions. When I explained the family pressure I was experiencing, she insisted on conducting comprehensive tests to evaluate my candidacy as a donor from a medical rather than emotional perspective. The results were shocking and changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. My own kidney function was borderline, hovering at the lower edge of normal range. Dr. Park explained that while I could technically survive with one kidney, donating would put me at significant risk for kidney disease later in life. The tests revealed early markers suggesting that kidney problems might be genetic in our family, making me a poor candidate for donation. The irony was staggering. My parents wanted me to sacrifice an organ that I might desperately need for my own survival in the coming decades. But the medical revelations were just the beginning. Dr. Park's thorough review of Caroline's medical history, which my parents had provided as part of the donor evaluation process, revealed information that my family had carefully omitted from their emotional appeals. Caroline's kidney disease wasn't the result of bad luck or genetic predisposition. It was directly linked to prescription drug abuse that had been ongoing throughout medical school. The pattern of stimulant abuse, pain medication dependency, and liver damage was clearly documented in her medical records, but somehow never mentioned in family discussions. Further investigation revealed that Caroline had been prescribed Adderall for ADHD during her first year of medical school, and had quickly escalated to taking unprescribed doses to maintain her academic performance. When that stopped working effectively, she had moved on to other stimulants and pain medications, often obtaining prescriptions from multiple doctors, or using her medical school access to acquire drugs. The kidney damage was a predictable consequence of her substance abuse, not a mysterious illness that required family heroics to resolve. When I confronted my parents with this medical evidence, their response revealed the depth of their deception and favoritism. Instead of acknowledging Caroline's addiction or expressing concern about my own kidney health, they accused me of lying and doctor shopping to find excuses for my selfishness. My mother actually suggested that I had somehow convinced Dr. Park to falsify my test results because I was looking for a way out of helping my sister. My father dismissed the evidence of Caroline's drug abuse as irrelevant to the current situation, arguing that her past mistakes didn't mean she deserved to die. Caroline's reaction to being confronted about her prescription drug abuse was masterful manipulation, disguised as vulnerability. She admitted to taking extra study aids during medical school, but characterized it as a common practice among competitive students rather than abuse that had damaged her organs. She cried about the pressure she had been under to maintain her grades and make the family proud, effectively turning her addiction into another reason why she deserved sympathy and support. According to Caroline's version of events, she had suffered enough already and didn't deserve to be punished further for mistakes made under stress. My parents' knowledge of Caroline's addiction became clear through a series of confrontations that revealed their complicity in covering up her problems. They had known about her prescription drug abuse for over 2 years, and had helped her find treatment while carefully hiding the situation from extended family and friends. They had paid for private rehabilitation programs and specialty addiction counseling while publicly maintaining that Caroline was simply working too hard in medical school. Their willingness to conceal her addiction while demanding my kidney showed a level of moral bankruptcy that left me reeling. The family's response to my medical evidence was to double down on their demands, while attacking my character and motivation. They gave me a 48-hour ultimatum. Agree to the donation or face consequences that would permanently damage my relationship with the family. The threat was both emotional and financial, encompassing everything from public humiliation to loss of family inheritance. They had moved past persuasion into coercion, making it clear that my autonomy over my own body was less important than Caroline's needs. My support system began crumbling as family pressure extended to my romantic relationship. My boyfriend Kevin started receiving calls from his own family members, who had been contacted by my parents to explain the situation. Kevin's parents, who had known my family for years through community connections, began pressuring him to convince me to help Caroline. The pressure on Kevin to choose between supporting my decision and maintaining family harmony put strain on our relationship that ultimately proved insurmountable. When Kevin suggested that maybe I was being too stubborn about helping my sister, I realized that even my closest personal relationship was being weaponized against my autonomy. The final violation of my privacy came when my parents found and read excerpts from my childhood diary during a family gathering designed to pressure me into compliance. They had searched through my old bedroom and found journals I had written as a teenager, containing normal adolescent complaints about sibling rivalry and family dynamics. They read selected passages aloud to gathered relatives as proof that I had always been jealous of Caroline, and was now using her medical crisis to act out childhood resentments. The violation was so profound that I left the gathering immediately, finally understanding that my family viewed my privacy, autonomy, and emotional well-being as acceptable casualties in their campaign to save Caroline. The lawsuit papers arrived at my workplace on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a professional process server who announced my name loudly enough for half the office to hear. The humiliation was immediate and intentional. My parents had specifically chosen to have me served at work rather than at home, ensuring maximum professional embarrassment. The charges were even more shocking than I had anticipated. Failure to provide reasonable family support and intentional infliction of emotional distress, as if refusing to donate my organs constituted a form of family abandonment punishable by law. Reading through the legal documents revealed the extent of my family's willingness to distort reality in service of their agenda. The lawsuit portrayed me as a vindictive daughter who was withholding life-saving medical assistance out of spite and jealousy. According to their narrative, I was using Caroline's illness as an opportunity to punish my family for childhood grievances, and my refusal to donate was causing Caroline severe emotional trauma that warranted monetary damages. The legal strategy was clearly designed to portray them as desperate parents fighting for their child's life against an unreasonably cruel sibling. My coworkers' reactions ranged from confusion to barely concealed judgment, and I could feel the office dynamics shifting around me immediately. My boss, Patricia Williams, called me into her office within hours of the service to ask whether this legal situation would affect my work performance or the company's reputation. The questions felt like an interrogation about my character rather than a supportive inquiry about my well-being. By the end of the week, I noticed colleagues avoiding casual conversation with me, apparently unsure how to interact with someone whose own family considered her heartless enough to sue. The media attention began when a local journalist picked up the court filing and decided the selfish sister angle would make compelling human interest content. The initial article presented my family's version of events without seeking my input, painting Caroline as a promising young doctor whose career was threatened by her sister's unwillingness to help. The story included a recent photo of Caroline looking pale and beautiful in her white coat, juxtaposed with an unflattering candid shot of me leaving the courthouse. Online comments were brutal, with strangers calling me everything from heartless to evil based on incomplete information about our situation. Caroline's medical emergency, which occurred just 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, seemed almost too perfectly timed to be coincidental. According to my parents' dramatic social media posts, Caroline had collapsed during a routine checkup and was hospitalized for monitoring and treatment adjustment. The timing coincided perfectly with the media coverage of our legal battle, generating sympathy for Caroline and reinforcing the narrative that my refusal to help was literally killing her. Family, friends, and community members rallied around Caroline, organizing prayer circles and fundraising efforts that positioned her as a tragic victim of family betrayal. Hospital visitation became another battlefield when I was told that Caroline had specifically requested that I be banned from her room for her own emotional safety. The nursing staff treated me with suspicion when I attempted to visit, and security was called when I tried to speak with Caroline's doctors about her condition. My parents had successfully positioned themselves as Caroline's protectors against my allegedly harmful influence, creating a situation where my attempts to gather information about her health were characterized as harassment or stalking. Extended family members began choosing sides with depressing predictability. My grandparents, who had always favored Caroline, released a public statement through my aunt expressing their support for Caroline and their disappointment in my choices. Cousins I had grown up with sent messages ranging from disappointed to hostile, all accepting my parents' version of events without question. The family narrative was so compelling and emotionally resonant that few people bothered to investigate the medical realities or question whether parents might be wrong to sue their child for refusing organ donation. The financial warfare escalated when my parents followed through on their threats to freeze joint accounts that I had relied on for student loan payments and emergency expenses. They also contacted my student loan provider to remove themselves as co-signers, despite the potential impact on my credit rating and financial stability. The message was clear: comply with their demands or face complete financial abandonment. The timing was carefully calculated to create maximum pressure during an already stressful period. Professional sabotage came in the form of concerned phone calls to my employer, supposedly from family members worried about my mental health and stability. My parents painted my refusal to help Caroline as evidence of a psychological breakdown that might affect my work performance or decision-making ability. They suggested that I was under severe stress and might need professional intervention, creating doubt about my competence and reliability in my supervisor's mind. The attacks on my professional reputation were particularly devastating because my career was one of the few areas where I had achieved success independent of family expectations. The social media harassment campaign orchestrated by Caroline's friends and medical school classmates was relentless and cruel. They created posts featuring Caroline's medical school graduation photos alongside captions about family loyalty and sacrifice. My social media accounts were flooded with comments from strangers calling me selfish and heartless, many including suggestions that I should be forced to donate whether I wanted to or not. The online mob mentality was frightening in its intensity and uniformity, suggesting coordinated effort rather than organic outrage. My first real ally emerged when my college roommate Sarah offered me a place to stay and emotional support during the legal battle. Sarah had witnessed our family dynamics during college visits, and was one of the few people who understood that my hesitation might be justified rather than selfish. Her willingness to provide practical help and emotional validation was a lifeline during a period when almost everyone else in my life was questioning my character and choices. The discovery that changed everything came when I found documents showing that my parents had taken out a life insurance policy on me several years earlier. The policy was substantial enough to cover Caroline's medical expenses and more, raising disturbing questions about their long-term planning and motivations. When confronted about the insurance policy, they claimed it was a normal financial planning tool for families, but the timing and amount suggested they had been viewing me as a financial asset for Caroline's benefit rather than as an independent person with my own right to autonomy and safety. Finding legal representation proved more challenging than expected, as most attorneys were reluctant to take a case that involved family conflict over organ donation. The medical and ethical complexities, combined with the negative media coverage, made many lawyers hesitant to associate their practices with such a controversial situation. Finally, attorney David Chong agreed to represent me pro bono, partly because he specialized in family abuse cases and recognized the patterns of manipulation and coercion in my situation. His willingness to take my case seriously was the first professional validation I had received that my position might be legally and morally defensible. Our counter-strategy involved filing harassment charges against my family, while building a comprehensive defense against their lawsuit. David's investigation revealed that my parents' legal claims had little basis in established law, as no jurisdiction in the United States had ever successfully compelled organ donation from unwilling family members. The novelty of their legal theory worked in our favor, as precedent strongly supported individual autonomy over bodily integrity. We prepared to challenge their case on constitutional grounds while documenting the harassment and manipulation I had endured. The medical evidence became crucial to our defense strategy when Dr. Park agreed to testify about the risks to my own health from kidney donation. Her testimony would establish that my refusal was based on legitimate medical concerns rather than selfish motivations. Additionally, we obtained Caroline's complete medical records through legal discovery, revealing the full extent of her prescription drug abuse and its role in causing her current kidney problems. The documentation painted a very different picture than the innocent victim narrative my family had promoted. My parents' desperation became apparent when they hired a private investigator to search for compromising information about my personal life, relationships, and financial situation. The investigator contacted former boyfriends, college professors, and previous employers, asking questions designed to uncover evidence of instability, irresponsibility, or moral failings that could be used against me in court. The invasion of privacy was extensive and systematic, reflecting their determination to win at any cost, even if it meant destroying my reputation and relationships in the process. The setup came when Caroline allegedly collapsed at the grocery store where I worked part-time on weekends. According to witnesses, she had been shopping normally when she suddenly became dizzy and fell, requiring emergency medical attention. The incident occurred during my scheduled shift, and several customers reported seeing me in the store at the time. My parents immediately claimed that I had been following Caroline and had threatened her, causing emotional distress that triggered her medical episode. The accusation was serious enough to warrant police investigation. The arrest was brief but humiliating, as police detained me for questioning about alleged stalking and threats against Caroline. My parents had provided a detailed statement claiming that I had been harassing Caroline by showing up at places she frequented and making threatening comments about her health and medical treatment. The charges were dropped within 24 hours when security footage from the grocery store clearly showed that I had been working my regular shift and had not interacted with Caroline at all during her visit. Despite my vindication, the arrest had immediate professional consequences. My employer felt compelled to suspend me pending a full investigation of the allegations, concerned about the potential liability of employing someone accused of stalking and threatening behavior. The suspension was unpaid, creating additional financial stress during an already difficult period. Even though the charges were dropped, the cloud of suspicion affected my relationships with coworkers and customers who had heard about the incident. The second major betrayal came from Sarah when her boyfriend Michael began pressuring her to reconsider housing me during the legal battle. Michael had been contacted by mutual friends who knew my family, and he had become convinced that there might be some truth to my parents' characterization of me as unstable and vindictive. His pressure on Sarah to evict me created tension in their relationship, and forced Sarah to choose between supporting me and maintaining harmony with her boyfriend. The stress of being caught in the middle of my family drama began affecting Sarah's own life in ways that made my continued presence in her home problematic. The fake suicide attempt represented a new low in my family's manipulation tactics. According to my parents' frantic social media posts and calls to relatives, Caroline had attempted to harm herself because she couldn't bear the emotional pain of my rejection and cruelty. They claimed she had been found unconscious in her apartment with empty prescription bottles nearby, requiring emergency medical intervention and psychiatric evaluation. The story generated massive sympathy and positioned my refusal to help as literally driving Caroline to attempt self-harm. Hospital manipulation reached new heights when I was banned from the psychiatric wing where Caroline was allegedly being treated for her suicide attempt. My parents had convinced hospital security that my presence would be detrimental to Caroline's recovery, and might trigger another crisis. They positioned themselves as protective parents, keeping their vulnerable daughter safe from the family member who had caused her emotional breakdown. The restriction prevented me from gathering information about Caroline's actual condition or verifying the details of her supposed suicide attempt. My new alliance with Mark, another survivor of family abuse whom my lawyer had connected me with, provided crucial perspective and practical support. Mark had experienced similar manipulation tactics from his own family during a different kind of crisis, and he understood the psychological warfare involved in systematic family gaslighting. His insights helped me recognize patterns I had been too close to see clearly, and his practical advice about documenting harassment and protecting my mental health proved invaluable during the most intense period of family pressure. Mark's assistance with investigating my parents' history revealed a pattern of manipulation that extended beyond their treatment of me. He helped me contact Caroline's previous boyfriends and discover that my parents had interfered in her relationships whenever her partners began questioning her behavior or expressing concern about her drug use. They had a history of protecting Caroline from consequences while portraying anyone who challenged her as the problem. This pattern of enabling and manipulation had been ongoing for years, with me being just the latest target of their protective aggression. The evidence we uncovered suggested that my parents had been systematically destroying Caroline's ability to face reality about her addiction and its consequences. Instead of helping her develop accountability and healthy coping mechanisms, they had taught her that she could avoid responsibility by playing victim and manipulating others into solving her problems. My refusal to donate my kidney represented the first time someone in Caroline's life had refused to enable her destructive patterns, which explained the intensity of the family's response to my decision. Our private investigator's success in uncovering the truth about Caroline's medical condition provided the breakthrough our legal case desperately needed. The investigation revealed medical records from multiple doctors and treatment facilities, showing a clear pattern of doctor shopping and prescription abuse that had been carefully concealed from most family members and friends. Caroline had been obtaining stimulants and pain medications from at least 6 different physicians over the past 3 years, often using her medical student status to gain access to controlled substances and avoid detection of her abuse patterns. Caroline's continued drug use even during her kidney disease treatment was the most shocking discovery. While publicly portraying herself as a victim of mysterious illness and family betrayal, she was privately continuing to abuse the same substances that had caused her kidney damage in the first place. Pharmacy records showed regular prescriptions for stimulants and pain medications that were contraindicated for someone with her kidney condition, suggesting that she was either lying to her doctors about her medical status or continuing to obtain drugs through illegal means. The financial motive behind my parents' desperation became clear when our investigation uncovered the extent of their medical debt and financial planning around Caroline's illness. They had already borrowed heavily against their retirement savings and home equity to pay for Caroline's private addiction treatment and medical care, leaving them financially vulnerable to her ongoing medical expenses. Their plan appeared to involve using my health insurance and future earning potential to subsidize Caroline's care, while positioning her as a disabled dependent who could qualify for various benefit programs. The insurance fraud scheme was elaborate and probably illegal. My parents had been working with Caroline to document her condition in ways that would maximize her disability claims, while minimizing any mention of substance abuse as a contributing factor. They had coached her to emphasize genetic predisposition and environmental factors, while downplaying lifestyle choices that might affect her eligibility for benefits. The goal was to establish Caroline as a sympathetic victim of circumstances beyond her control, rather than someone whose choices had contributed to her medical problems. Caroline's recorded confession came through a conversation she had with her ex-boyfriend Jake, who had grown suspicious of her behavior and decided to document their interactions. Jake had been contacted by our investigator and agreed to record a phone conversation in which Caroline admitted to faking the suicide attempt and lying about several aspects of her medical condition. In the recording, Caroline laughed about how easily she could manipulate hospital staff and family members by playing the victim, and she specifically mentioned that her parents would do anything to protect her from consequences. The family fractures began when some relatives started questioning the official narrative after inconsistencies emerged in my parents' stories. My Uncle Tom, who worked in healthcare administration, became suspicious when he noticed discrepancies between Caroline's public statements about her condition and the medical realities of kidney disease. His questions led other family members to begin investigating independently, and some began reaching out to me privately to express doubts about the situation they had been presented. Media attention shifted when investigative journalist Lisa Rodriguez became interested in the real story behind our family's legal battle. Lisa had initially planned to write a follow-up piece about the selfish sister, but her research uncovered enough inconsistencies to warrant deeper investigation. Her access to public records and medical professionals provided independent verification of the addiction issues and financial motivations that our private investigator had discovered. The prospect of media scrutiny began making my parents nervous about their legal strategy. Caroline's public breakdown occurred during a family gathering that was supposed to demonstrate unity and support for her medical needs. Instead of maintaining her victim persona, Caroline lost control when questioned about inconsistencies in her medical timeline. She began screaming about how ungrateful I was and how the family owed her everything because she was the smart one, the successful one, the one who mattered. Her mask slipped completely as she revealed the narcissistic entitlement that had been carefully hidden beneath her victim performance. My parents' escalation included threats to disown me completely and erase me from family history if I continued fighting their lawsuit. They threatened to destroy photos, remove me from family documents, and ensure that I would be excluded from all future family events and inheritance considerations. The threats were designed to force me to choose between my autonomy and my family identity, betting that the fear of complete abandonment would override my commitment to protecting my own health and well-being. The property theft was both practical and symbolic, as my parents went through my childhood bedroom and disposed of everything I had left in their home over the years. Photo albums, awards, personal mementos, and items with sentimental value were either thrown away or sold, effectively erasing evidence of my place in family history. When I discovered what they had done, they claimed they needed space for Caroline's medical equipment and couldn't maintain storage for someone who had abandoned the family. Anonymous death threats began arriving through various channels, including social media, email, and even handwritten notes left on my car. The messages were specific enough to suggest inside knowledge of my daily routine and personal details, but careful analysis revealed that they originated from accounts connected to Caroline's medical school friends and social circle. The threats were serious enough to warrant police investigation, but the perpetrators were careful to use anonymous accounts and public computers to avoid detection. The restraining order became necessary when the harassment escalated to include following me to work, showing up at my apartment building, and confronting me in public places. Caroline's friends had organized a harassment campaign that involved multiple people taking turns monitoring my activities and creating situations designed to intimidate and frighten me. The legal protection was limited but official, establishing a legal record of the systematic harassment I was experiencing from my own family members and their allies. My professional vindication came when my employer completed their investigation of the stalking allegations and concluded that I had been the victim of false accusations designed to damage my reputation and employment prospects. The security footage and witness statements clearly demonstrated that my family's claims were fabricated, and my supervisor apologized for the suspension, while offering additional support during my legal battle. The workplace support was crucial for my financial stability and emotional well-being during the most intense period of family warfare. Trial preparation revealed the extent of media attention our case had generated, transforming a family legal dispute into a broader conversation about organ donation ethics and family obligations. The courtroom was packed with reporters, medical ethicists, and members of the public who had strong opinions about whether families could legally compel organ donation. I received death threats from strangers who viewed my refusal to help Caroline as morally reprehensible, while also receiving support from advocates for medical autonomy and abuse survivors who understood the manipulation dynamics involved. Caroline's courtroom performance was a masterpiece of victim theater. carefully calculated to generate maximum sympathy from judge and jury. She appeared pale and fragile, dressed in conservative clothing that emphasized her youth and vulnerability. Her testimony focused on her dreams of helping patients, her fear of dying young, and her confusion about why her own sister would refuse to save her life when she had the power to do so. She spoke softly, requiring the microphone to be adjusted, and frequently paused to compose herself as if overwhelmed by emotion. My parents' testimony revealed the depth of their delusion and willingness to lie under oath to protect Caroline and vilify me. They testified about my alleged violent tendencies, citing childhood incidents of normal sibling conflict as evidence of deep-seated aggression and jealousy. They claimed I had always resented Caroline's success and was using her medical crisis as an opportunity to finally hurt her in a permanent way. Their performance was convincing enough to generate sympathy from observers who didn't have access to the full context of our family dynamics. The presentation of medical evidence transformed the courtroom atmosphere, as Dr. Park explained the risks to my own health from kidney donation and the medical realities of Caroline's condition. Her professional testimony established that my decision was medically sound rather than emotionally motivated, and that Caroline's kidney disease was directly related to her prescription drug abuse rather than genetic bad luck. The medical facts contradicted the emotional narrative my family had constructed around Caroline's illness. Caroline's ex-boyfriend Jake's testimony as a surprise witness provided crucial evidence about Caroline's deception and manipulation. Jake testified about Caroline's admission to faking the suicide attempt and her bragging about manipulating family members and medical professionals. His testimony included specific details about Caroline's continued drug use and her parents' knowledge of her addiction problems. The revelation that Caroline had been lying about fundamental aspects of her condition undermined her credibility and exposed the family's willingness to deceive the court. Caroline's meltdown on the witness stand was spectacular and revealing, as she lost control when confronted with evidence of her deception. Instead of maintaining her victim persona, she became angry and defensive, attacking Jake's credibility and claiming he was lying because she had rejected his attempts at reconciliation. Her mask slipped completely as she revealed the narcissistic rage that had been hidden beneath her victim performance, screaming about how everyone owed her support because she was special and deserving. My parents' desperate attempt to claim I was mentally ill and unfit to make medical decisions represented their final legal strategy when all other approaches failed. They presented altered psychological evaluations that supposedly documented my mental instability and vindictive personality, hoping to convince the court that my refusal was the result of mental illness rather than rational decision-making. The strategy was risky because it required them to present fabricated evidence that could be easily disproven. The discovery that my parents had presented falsified medical records was the turning point in the trial. Our legal team's expert analysis revealed that psychological evaluations presented as evidence had been altered to include diagnoses and recommendations that didn't match the original documents. The revelation that my parents were willing to commit fraud in court to win their case shocked even the judge, who had initially been sympathetic to their position as desperate parents trying to save their child. Judge Harrison's reaction to the evidence of fraud and manipulation was swift and decisive. She expressed shock at the extent of deception involved in the case, and noted that the evidence suggested systematic psychological abuse, rather than a genuine family medical emergency. Her comments from the bench indicated that she viewed my parents' behavior as predatory rather than protective, and that their willingness to manipulate the legal system raised serious questions about their fitness as parents. Caroline's final betrayal was her claim under oath that I had physically abused her throughout childhood, providing detailed accounts of alleged violence that could be easily disproven through medical records and witness testimony. Her desperation led her to make accusations so extreme and provably false that they undermined any remaining credibility she might have had. Medical records showed no evidence of the injuries she described, and family friends testified that they had never witnessed or suspected any violence between us. My parents' last stand involved threatening to destroy me completely through media manipulation and family exile if I didn't withdraw my defense and agree to donate my kidney. They claimed that fighting their lawsuit would result in permanent family destruction and public humiliation, that would follow me for the rest of my life. The threats were designed to force me to choose between my physical safety and my social connections, betting that the fear of isolation would override my commitment to self-protection. The community division was evident both inside and outside the courtroom, as supporters and opponents of my position organized competing demonstrations and media campaigns. Some community members viewed my refusal as selfish and morally indefensible, while others recognized the case as an example of family abuse and manipulation. The polarization reflected broader cultural conflicts about individual rights versus family obligations, with my situation becoming a symbol for larger debates about autonomy and sacrifice. The verdict was decisive and comprehensive, with Judge Harrison dismissing my family's lawsuit and awarding me damages for harassment, emotional distress, and legal expenses. Her written decision noted that the evidence revealed systematic psychological abuse rather than a legitimate family medical emergency, and that my parents' behavior constituted a form of predatory manipulation that warranted legal protection. The monetary award was substantial enough to cover my legal expenses and provide some compensation for the professional and personal damage I had suffered during the legal battle. The legal victory felt surreal after months of systematic harassment and manipulation, but Judge Harrison's comprehensive ruling provided official validation that my position had been reasonable and that my family's behavior had been abusive. The court's decision established legal precedent protecting individual autonomy over organ donation decisions, even in cases involving family pressure and emotional manipulation. The monetary damages awarded were substantial enough to cover my legal expenses and provide financial independence from my family for the first time in my adult life. The financial compensation included reimbursement for lost wages, legal fees, and additional damages for emotional distress and harassment. More importantly, the court's recognition of my family's behavior as systematically abusive provided official documentation that would protect me from future legal harassment. The judgment established that my refusal had been medically sound and ethically defensible, rather than selfish or vindictive as my family had claimed. Media vindication came as investigative journalists uncovered the full extent of Caroline's addiction and my parents' deception, leading to a complete reversal in public opinion about our case. The initial coverage portraying me as a heartless sister was replaced by in-depth reporting about family abuse, medical manipulation, and the ethics of forced organ donation. National news outlets picked up the story as an example of how family dynamics can become predatory and how legal systems can be manipulated to enable abuse. Caroline faced serious consequences when her medical school launched an investigation into her prescription drug abuse and academic dishonesty. The evidence revealed during our legal battle documented a pattern of substance abuse and deception that violated medical school codes of conduct and potentially criminal laws regarding controlled substances. Her dreams of becoming a physician were jeopardized by her own choices and the exposure of problems that had been carefully concealed for years. Despite losing decisively in court, my parents continued their denial and refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing in their treatment of me. They maintained that they had been desperate parents trying to save their child, and that my legal victory was the result of technicalities rather than moral clarity. Their inability to accept responsibility or show remorse demonstrated the depth of their delusion and narcissistic investment in maintaining Caroline's victim status, while portraying me as the family villain. The extended family reckoning was painful but necessary, as relatives were forced to confront evidence that contradicted the narrative they had accepted about our family situation. Some aunts, uncles, and cousins reached out to apologize for their treatment of me during the crisis, acknowledging that they had been manipulated and had failed to investigate the situation independently. Others doubled down on their support for my parents, choosing to maintain family loyalty rather than acknowledge uncomfortable truths about Caroline's behavior and their own complicity in my abuse. My professional restoration came as my employer and colleagues learned the truth about my family's false accusations and legal harassment. The company issued a formal apology for my suspension and offered me expanded responsibilities and a promotion as recognition of my integrity under pressure. Professional relationships that had been damaged by my family's smear campaign were gradually repaired as the truth became public knowledge. Building relationships with fellow abuse survivors provided crucial emotional support and practical guidance for rebuilding my life after family rejection. Support groups for adults estranged from toxic families helped me understand that my experience was not unique, and that healing was possible even after profound betrayal. Learning from others who had successfully established independence from abusive family systems provided a roadmap for my own recovery process. Caroline's overdose occurred 6 months after our legal battle ended, representing either a genuine medical emergency or another manipulative crisis designed to generate sympathy and blame me for her continued struggles. The incident was serious enough to require emergency medical intervention, but the circumstances suggested that her addiction had progressed rather than improved despite the family crisis and legal consequences. My parents immediately blamed me for Caroline's deterioration, claiming that my refusal to help had destroyed her will to live and contributed to her spiral into more serious drug abuse. The final legal battle came when my parents attempted to appeal the court's decision, claiming that media attention had influenced the judge's ruling and prevented them from receiving fair consideration of their case. Their legal team argued that the publicity around medical ethics and family abuse had created bias against parents seeking help for sick children. The appeal was unsuccessful, but the process extended the legal drama and required additional emotional energy to defend the verdict I had already won. My parents' threat to disinherit me completely and leave their estate to charity was their final attempt to leverage financial control over my choices and punish me for refusing to submit to their demands. They made public statements about changing their will to exclude me entirely, claiming that children who abandon their families don't deserve family inheritance. The threat was designed to create regret and anxiety about my decision to prioritize my own health and autonomy over family harmony. Caroline's continued manipulation during her recovery process demonstrated that neither the legal consequences nor the medical crisis had inspired genuine change in her behavior patterns. She used her time in rehabilitation as a platform for continued victim narrative, giving interviews about how family betrayal had contributed to her addiction and medical problems. Her inability to accept responsibility for her own choices or acknowledge the impact of her manipulation on others showed that the family dysfunction would continue regardless of legal outcomes. My commitment to maintaining boundaries and refusing to be drawn back into family drama required constant vigilance and emotional strength. Well-meaning friends and acquaintances often suggested that family reconciliation would be healing, not understanding that reconnecting with systematically abusive people would be dangerous rather than therapeutic. The pressure to forgive and forget came from cultural expectations about family loyalty that didn't account for situations where families themselves were the source of trauma and danger. The process of moving forward required grieving the family I had hoped to have while accepting the reality of the family I actually had. Letting go of the fantasy that my parents might someday acknowledge their mistakes and treat me with respect was painful, but necessary for my own healing. Building a new life based on chosen relationships, rather than biological obligations, provided freedom and authenticity that had been impossible within my family system. My decision to relocate to Portland represented both geographical freedom and symbolic rebirth, as I established myself in a city where my family history couldn't define my identity or limit my opportunities. The move allowed me to start fresh in a community that valued individual authenticity over family expectations, and where my professional skills and personal qualities could be evaluated independently of my family drama. Working for a nonprofit organization focused on family abuse prevention felt like transforming my painful experiences into meaningful service for others facing similar challenges. The therapy journey became central to my healing process as I worked with Dr. Sarah Chen to understand the psychological dynamics that had shaped my family relationships and learn healthier patterns for future connections. Through trauma-informed therapy, I learned about narcissistic family systems, scapegoating dynamics, and the long-term effects of emotional abuse on self-worth and relationship patterns. Understanding that my family's treatment was systematic rather than personal helped me release shame and guilt about my decision to prioritize my own well-being. Building new friendships based on mutual respect and genuine affection was a revelation after years of relationships contaminated by family manipulation and conditional love. Learning to trust my own judgment about people's character and motivations required practice, as I had been trained from childhood to doubt my perceptions and prioritize others' needs over my own safety. The friends I made in Portland valued honesty, integrity, and emotional authenticity in ways that felt revolutionary after my family's emphasis on appearance and manipulation. Career growth in an environment where I was valued for my skills and character rather than my usefulness to family members allowed me to discover professional satisfaction and personal pride that had been impossible in my previous life. Leading advocacy programs for family abuse survivors felt like the perfect integration of my personal experience with my professional skills, turning my painful family history into a source of strength and wisdom that could help others. The work was emotionally challenging but deeply meaningful, providing purpose and validation that healed some of the wounds from my family rejection. Caroline's continued downward spiral included multiple relapses, legal problems related to prescription fraud, and eventual expulsion from medical school when the full extent of her academic dishonesty was discovered. Her inability to maintain sobriety or accept responsibility for her choices validated my decision to refuse enabling her destructive patterns through organ donation. My parents' gradual recognition that Caroline's problems were beyond their ability to fix marked the beginning of their own confrontation with reality, though they never acknowledged their role in enabling her addiction or abusing me. The unexpected contact came when Caroline reached out through social media, attempting reconciliation that was clearly motivated by her need for support rather than genuine remorse or desire for healthy relationship. Her message focused on her struggles and medical problems while minimizing the abuse and manipulation she had participated in during our legal battle. The attempt at reconciliation felt like another manipulation strategy rather than authentic accountability, confirming that she had not developed the self-awareness or empathy necessary for genuine relationship repair. Maintaining firm boundaries required constant vigilance, as Caroline's attempts at contact escalated when her initial overtures were ignored. She tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances, creating fake social media accounts, and even showing up at my workplace during a visit to Portland. Each contact attempt was documented and reported to law enforcement as a violation of the restraining order, but the persistence demonstrated that her manipulative patterns remained unchanged despite all the consequences she had faced. My parents' eventual realization that they had lost their daughter through their own choices came too late to repair the damage they had caused, but it marked an important shift in their understanding of the situation. According to family members who remained in contact with them, they began expressing regret about the lawsuit and acknowledging that their treatment of me had been wrong. However, their belated recognition came without any attempt to make amends or accept responsibility for the abuse they had perpetrated. Community healing occurred as my story inspired other abuse survivors to recognize their own situations and seek help to escape toxic family dynamics. Speaking at conferences and support groups about family abuse and medical autonomy helped other people understand that they weren't alone in experiencing manipulation, and that resistance to family pressure could be both moral and necessary. The positive impact of sharing my story transformed my painful experiences into a source of strength and purpose that benefited others facing similar challenges. Meeting David, my romantic partner, represented the first healthy relationship I had experienced with someone who loved and respected me as an individual rather than valuing me for what I could provide to others. His background as a fellow abuse survivor meant he understood trauma recovery and the importance of boundaries, consent, and mutual respect in relationships. Learning to trust someone completely while maintaining my own identity and autonomy felt like a miracle after years of relationships contaminated by family manipulation and conditional love. Professional success in developing and leading advocacy programs for family abuse survivors provided both personal satisfaction and community impact that validated my decision to prioritize my own well-being over family expectations. The programs helped hundreds of people recognize abuse patterns, develop safety plans, and build independent lives free from toxic family control. My expertise in family manipulation tactics and recovery processes became valuable resources for other survivors and the professionals who served them. The final test came when my father suffered a heart attack, and my mother reached out through intermediaries to request deathbed reconciliation and forgiveness. The emotional manipulation was sophisticated, playing on cultural expectations about family forgiveness and final opportunities for healing. However, my decision to maintain no contact even during my father's medical crisis demonstrated my commitment to self-protection over false family obligations. Choosing my own emotional safety over their need for absolution was painful, but necessary for my continued healing. My peace came from understanding that my worth as a person was not determined by my family's opinion, or my willingness to sacrifice myself for their needs. Learning to value my own life, health, and happiness as equally important to anyone else's was a revolutionary concept after years of being trained to prioritize others' needs. The freedom to make choices based on my own values and well-being rather than family pressure was the greatest gift I could give myself. The life lesson that emerged from this painful journey was that family is defined by love, respect, and mutual support rather than biological relationships or legal obligations. The people who truly cared about my well-being supported my right to make autonomous decisions about my own body and life, while those who demanded my sacrifice regardless of the cost to my health and happiness revealed themselves to be users rather than family in any meaningful sense. My philosophical reflection on the experience led me to understand that sometimes walking away from toxic people is the most loving choice we can make for ourselves and even for them. Enabling destructive behavior by submitting to manipulation doesn't help anyone grow or heal, while setting firm boundaries forces people to confront the consequences of their choices. My refusal to donate my kidney ultimately protected both my health and my integrity, while refusing to participate in a family system based on exploitation and abuse. The hope I offer to others facing similar situations is that recovery from family abuse is possible, and that building an authentic life based on your own values is worth the pain of family rejection. Many people struggle with toxic family dynamics and feel trapped by cultural expectations about family loyalty and obligation. My story demonstrates that choosing self-preservation over family harmony can lead to greater happiness, healthier relationships, and meaningful contribution to community healing. In closing, I want to share that my journey taught me that my worth isn't determined by what others can take from me, but by what I choose to give freely from a place of strength and autonomy. Family relationships should enhance our lives rather than diminish them, and when biological family fails to provide love and support, we have the right and responsibility to create chosen families based on mutual respect and genuine care. The courage to walk away from toxicity, even when it comes from family, is sometimes the greatest act of self-love we can perform. What would you do if your family tried to force you to donate an organ? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming family toxicity and finding your own path. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your life and choices matter just as much as anyone else's. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on your willingness to sacrifice yourself for their benefit.